Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina for continuation of the hearing in docket 2022-142-WS, the rate case application of Daufuskie Allen Utility Company Incorporated. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin, and present in the hearing room, we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. As we came back from the break, staff council conferred with the parties. I just would like to put on the record that there's been some discussion of the 2014 rate case. At that time, I was employed as general counsel with the Office of Regulatory Staff. I did not work on this case as an attorney. I was familiar with some of the discussions that was going on at that time, but I did not participate as counsel of record in that case. Since I've been on the commission, I have recused from every discussion and every vote regarding matters that came out of that 2014 rate case. I have disclosed my involvement or employment with ORS and the fact that I have recused on all the votes pertaining to that prior docket to the parties. I've asked the parties to confer and report to our staff council whether there was any objection to me continuing to participate in today's proceeding, and I'm advised that there is no objection from any party, and I'm not going to put any party on the spot, but is that the consensus? Mr. Pringle?
Chairman Belser, that is the consensus of all the parties.
Thank you. I just felt like it was important for everyone to understand. So thank you very much, and we will continue. And I think at this point we're with the recognizing Department of Consumer Affairs. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. And we'll call Aaron Rothschild.
Thank you. And I believe Mr. Rothschild is virtual. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'm here.
Good afternoon, Mr. There you are, and I can see you now. Hope you can see us.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to state your name for me.
Aaron L. Rothschild.
And I would ask that you raise your right hand and let me administer the oath. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hall now.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rothschild. Could you just again state your full name and business address for the record, please?
Aaron L. Rothschild, 15 Lake Road in Ridgefield, Connecticut.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Rothschild Financial Consulting, and I am president.
Thank you. And how long has your company been in existence?
I was just thinking that. I think it's 1982, and I've been with the firm since 2001.
And what type of services do you all generally provide?
Expert witness, the services predominantly focusing on rate of return, but also some accounting issues.
And could you briefly tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I have a BA degree in mathematics from Clark University and an MBA from Vanderbilt University.
And just again, briefly, your past employment history?
I performed financial analysis in the telecommunications industry in the United States and Asia Pacific from 1996 to 2001. I also worked as an investment banking consultant in New York for 2 years. I've been an affiliate of the New England Complex Systems Institute for 8 years, focusing on applying advanced modeling techniques to the power sector and capital markets.
Thank you. And how long have you been preparing rate of return testimonies?
Since 2002. My expert witness experience includes testifying in over 50 cost of capital proceedings before the following commissions: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, New Jersey, Maryland, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Vermont, and I've testified before this commission. This is six times. This will be my seventh.
Okay. And have you been accepted as a rate of return expert in all of those states?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, I would move to have Mr. Rothschild accepted as an expert in the capital structure, cost of capital, and financial analysis of regulated utilities.
Could you repeat that for me, Mr. Hall?
Yes, it is the capital structure, cost of capital, and financial analysis of regulated utilities. And for the record, this was the same expertise he was qualified in the recent Piedmont natural gas case.
I understand. I just don't write as fast as you talk.
Sorry.
Are there any questions regarding Mr. Rothschild's qualification as an expert in capital structure, cost of capital, and financial analysis of regulated utilities? Hearing no objection or no questions, we will recognize Mr. Rothschild as an expert in capital structure, cost of capital, and financial analysis of regulated utilities.
Thank you. Mr. Rothschild, did you prepare 112 pages of direct testimony for this docket, which was filed on September 29th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
And did your direct testimony include appendices A and B, which were the last 4 pages of that testimony?
Yes.
Did your direct testimony also include 49 pages of exhibits labeled ALR1 through ALR6?
Yes.
And did you also prepare 6 pages of surrebuttal testimony, which was filed on October 20th, 2022?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your testimony?
Yes, I have in my direct testimony the footnote reference to Exhibit A to E should be removed. There are references to commission orders in South Carolina, Connecticut, and Illinois, which I do not provide as exhibits. Therefore, the references to Exhibit A through E need to be.
And Madam Chair, those references are all on 2 different pages. I believe it's page 17 and 23 or 24, and the department will submit a red line and clean version with those changes at least by tomorrow.
We'll have that red line tomorrow?
Yes, ma'am. If that's
Okay.
okay.
Okay. In keeping what we did previously, well, go ahead and we'll accept those tomorrow, or have those tomorrow.
Okay. And just if it wasn't clear, they're basically references to other exhibits that were opinions in other states. Actually, one of them was an opinion from this commission that.
Can you get a little closer to that mic?
Yes.
Even I'm having trouble, but I've got a fan behind me, so.
Sure. They were just, if it wasn't clear, they're references to exhibits that weren't actually attached.
That were not
Were not
attached to, okay,
Right.
that's fine.
So get nothing.
I'm just trying to think, when we had another corrected exhibit, I held a separate exhibit number for the corrected pages, and I think we'll do that again. Go ahead and offer, and we'll deal with it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Rothschild, just for clarification, do these changes have any effect on the substance of your testimony or your opinions in this case?
No.
Okay. And if I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I would move to have the pre-filed direct and surrebuttal testimonies of Mr. Rothschild entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Mr. Rothschild's direct testimony will be admitted as if given from the stand, and Mr. Rothschild's surrebuttal testimony will be admitted as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would also move to have appendices A and B and exhibits ALR1 through ALR6, all from Mr. Rothschild's direct testimony, entered collectively as the next applicable hearing exhibits.
I want to go back to the testimony. I'm not sure I stated that correctly. Both his direct and rebuttal. I think I may have called it the wrong thing.
No, direct and surrebuttal.
Surrebuttal, okay. Direct and surrebuttal are entered into the record as if given from the stand. Mr. Rothschild's pre-filed direct, which are appendices A and B and exhibits ALR1 through ALR6, will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 10 and entered into the record of this case. And with regard to the corrected pages, we will hold exhibit 11, just to be consistent. Hearing exhibit 11 will be the 2 corrected pages from exhibit, was it A?
They're just from his direct testimony.
But appendix,
No, they're just references and footnotes.
Okay.
As direct testimony. So
corrected testimony pages.
correct. So should those still be entered? It's just the 2 pages as exhibits.
I'm confused, I'm sorry, and I know that this is on me. Tell me the pages that are being corrected.
I know I can tell you. Almost positive one is page 17. If you have it in front of you, everything is in the footnotes.
Okay, it's not exhibit pages, it's testimony pages.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the corrected testimony pages will be provided and filed on the DMS so that we can get those to the court reporter. Okay. But if you could give me the page numbers, Mr. Rothschild, do you know the page numbers?
Of where the exhibits are removed?
So,
Page 17 is correct.
is that the only page?
Aaron, it's either 23 or 24, I think.
Okay. All right, and you'll submit the corrected testimony pages. So
Yes, we had intended to submit the entire testimony, but I can just submit the 2 pages, whatever.
however you file it is fine.
Okay.
But I need to say that there will be the corrected direct testimony that goes into the record. That's why I couldn't find it. I was looking in the appendix A for the footnote. Okay. So hearing exhibit number 11 has not yet been used. Are we clear, or have I confused things immensely?
I've got it. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions? All right. Thank you.
Madam
Sorry.
Chair, I have a few brief questions for Mr. Rothschild to answer in order to deliver a summary of his testimony. Mr. Rothschild, will you please summarize your recommendations for the commission?
My direct testimony provides my recommendations to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina regarding the appropriate cost of equity, capital structure, and overall cost of capital for Daufuskie Island Utility Company. In summary, I recommend the following cost of capital for Daufuskie's wastewater operations. 1, an overall cost of capital or rate of return of 7.53% from a range of 7.1% to 7.96%. A cost of equity with a range of 7.58% to 9.36% and a specific point of 8.47%. A capital structure containing 48.43% common equity and 51.57% debt, which reflects the capital structure of my proxy group, and a cost of debt of 6.65%. My capital structure recommendation is based on the average common equity ratios of the 7 companies in my proxy group. My 6.65% cost of debt is based on the company's actual cost of debt as updated by Daufuskie in response to RRS audit requests. However, if the commission would like to be conservative, it would be reasonable to use ORS as witness McGlone's capital structure recommendation of 51.99% equity and 48.01% debt to set Daufuskie's rates. To arrive at my recommendation, I applied the GCF, including a constant growth and a non-constant growth method, and a CAPM analysis to a proxy group of 7 regulated water utility companies using data available through August 31st, 2022. Daufuskie's application requested an overall rate of return of 9.15%, a return on equity of 10.5%, a capital structure containing 64.9% common equity, and a 35.1% debt, and a cost of debt of 6.65%. The company's rate of return request, if adopted, would require consumers to pay over $200,000 more annually than if my recommendation was used to set rates. This revenue impact is small in absolute terms compared to larger utilities, but because Daufuskie has relatively few customers, it would make a difference to individual customers. If Daufuskie's authorized ROE is too low, Daufuskie will not be able to raise the funds it needs to provide safe and reliable service. And if it is too high, consumers will be overcharged. As you can see in Table 4 on page 14 of my direct testimony, Horizon Actuarial Services survey of dozens of major funds, including Goldman Sachs Asset Management and Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, showed equity return expectations of 4.1% to 9%. The cost of equity for the overall market is 9%. The cost of equity for a regulated utility company is significantly less than 9%. Mr. Guastella's cost of equity recommendation of 10.5% is significantly higher than my cost of equity model results in the equity return expectations of major financial institutions.
Thank you. And how has Daufuskie and Mr. Guastella responded to your recommendations?
Mr. Guastella did not criticize the cost of equity methodology I used to determine Daufuskie's cost of equity and my recommended ROE. However, he believes that Daufuskie should be awarded a higher ROE than my recommended 8.47% because he claims I did not address certain issues. I will address 3 of the topics he believes indicate my recommended ROE is too low. First, he claims that I should have adjusted my ROE recommendation to account for Daufuskie's small size. Second, he claims that I did not address Daufuskie's shortfall in its earned return on equity. Third, he claims that I did not address investors' willingness to provide capital to Daufuskie. Daufuskie's authorized ROE should not be adjusted because it is a small utility. As discussed on page 53 to 56 of my direct testimony, it is not appropriate to adjust Daufuskie's ROE because of its size, because recent studies show that the relationship between firm size and return is weak, and small water and wastewater companies are in high demand by investors around the country, including indicating that they can raise capital. Daufuskie should not receive a higher ROE because it has not been able to earn its authorized ROE. As discussed on page 104 and 105 of my direct testimony, Daufuskie's cost of equity and its capacity to earn its authorized ROE are completely different concepts. Its cost of equity is related to the return investors required to provide capital for an investment of equivalent risk. Therefore, it is not appropriate to charge consumers rates based on a higher ROE if Daufuskie has not earned its authorized ROE. If Daufuskie's issues with earning its authorized ROE is not its own fault, the Commission can allow Daufuskie to recover its increased costs and thereby increase its revenue requirement without increasing its authorized ROE. Daufuskie's capacity to raise equity capital. On page 55 and 56 of my direct testimony, I provide evidence that small water and wastewater companies are in demand by investors. S&P Global Market Intelligence reported in August 2020 that, quote, the appetite for growth via consolidation in the water sector has remained robust despite the current economic slowdown and global health pandemic. Of the 11 water and wastewater companies included in the report as having been acquired as of August 14, 2020, 3 companies had less than 1,000 customers. If Daufuskie is not able to raise equity capital, it is almost certainly not related to the size of the company. As discussed above, it is not appropriate to reward a utility with a higher authorized ROE because of poor performance.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rothschild, do your recommendations comply with established case law?
Yes. If adopted, my recommendations would give Daufuskie's
Objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Grasset?
I think that calls for a legal opinion the way it's phrased.
It's in his direct testimony, but that's fine.
Ask the question again, Mr. Hall.
I asked if his recommendations comply with established case law. I can ask if he believes his recommendations comply with established
Why don't you
case law.
rephrase the question, please?
Mr. Rothschild, do you believe your recommendations comply with established case law?
I do. If adopted, my recommendations would give Daufuskie's investors the opportunity to earn a return on equity commensurate with returns on investments in other enterprises having corresponding risks as required by the Supreme Court. Daufuskie's capacity to earn its authorized ROE is beyond the scope of my rate of return testimony. And as stated earlier, Daufuskie should not be allowed a higher ROE because it has not been able to earn its authorized ROE in the past.
And how did you calculate your cost of equity?
To arrive at my recommendations, I applied the discounted cash flow model, referred to as DCF, including a constant growth and non-constant growth method, and a capital asset pricing model, CAPM, analysis to a group of similar companies, a proxy group, using data available through August 31st, 2022. My constant growth DCF model is used by major financial institutions. JP Morgan Chase uses the sustainable growth form of the DCF method, as I do, in its 2019 long-term capital market assumptions publication. Principles of Corporate Finance, a leading financial textbook used in business schools and investment banks around the world, recommends using the very same method I use to calculate the cost of equity for regulated utility companies. As discussed in my direct testimony, my CAPM is based on methodologies used by Value Line, the Chicago Board, and the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, and published in peer-reviewed academic journals, including the Review of Financial Studies.
Thank you. Does that conclude your summary?
Yes.
Madam Chair, Mr. Rothschild is available for questions from the other parties in commission.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Pringle, on behalf of homeowner associations.
No questions, Chair Belser.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Yes, Office of Regulatory Staff.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rothschild. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm looking at your surrebuttal testimony, page 3, and you summarize 5 items that Mr. Guastella testified that you did not address in your testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is the sensitivity to earnings erosion for small utilities relevant to establishing an appropriate ROE range?
No.
Why is that?
As I had mentioned, the utility's capacity to earn its authorized ROE and the cost of equity are different concepts. So earning erosion is, I see as in the same area of related to utility's capacity to earn its authorized ROE.
Does the same go for investors' willingness to invest in any particular utility?
Yes, I would argue that it's in the same category. The only difference is that as I addressed in my direct testimony, small water and wastewater companies are in high demand, so that is related to potentially their cost of equity. So although it's not directly related, I just had addressed that in my direct testimony that these types of companies are in high demand, which is a good sign that my cost of equity or my ROE recommendation is reasonable.
Okay. Mr. Rothschild, I've just got a few questions for you relating to inflation. Investor expectations with respect to inflation are going to be captured in a methodologically sound cost of capital analysis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you aware that in the rebuttal testimony of company witness White, Mr. White asked the commission to make an adjustment to certain categories of DIUC's operating expenses for inflation that he asserts DIUC will experience?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Would you agree with me that if the commission were to allow DIUC to recover costs that the company doesn't actually incur for anticipated future inflation, that effectively DIUC will be able to realize a higher return on equity?
Yes, that's true.
In your experience, are inflationary adjustments applied to fixed financial instruments such as those used by DIUC?
No, I haven't seen that applied to fixed assets. No.
Are equity investors promised inflation-adjusted returns?
No.
I suppose, in fact, are equity investors assured any type of return on their investment?
No. There's a risk of investing, and they're not assured any return,
Okay.
any specific return.
Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. But the debt and equity markets do compensate investors for anticipated inflation. Is that right?
Yes, and I addressed that in my direct testimony where I show anticipated inflation. Yes.
Mr. Knowles, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you speak a little louder, please?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank
Chair
you.
Belzer. Mr. Rothschild, in times of greater inflation, would you agree with me that utilities can limit inflationary exposure by filing for rate increases?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that in South Carolina, Code Title 58 allows a water or wastewater utility to file a new rate application every year?
That's my understanding.
If the commission were to approve an inflationary adjustment as DIUC requests, wouldn't that disincentivize utilities from coming in for rate cases in times of interest rate declines?
Yes, I think that would be a disincentive. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Rothschild.
Thank you.
Mr. Gressett?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Well, thanks. You just testified a moment ago that you understand utilities in South Carolina can file for a rate increase anytime. Is that what you testified to?
I thought it was every year. Was my understanding. I don't know about. I didn't. It wasn't my understanding any time.
Do you know what ORS asks utilities to do when they file a rate case?
I'm not aware of everything ORS asks a utility when they file. No.
Would it surprise you that in this rate case, ORS has sent 200 discovery requests?
That wouldn't surprise me. That sounds typical for cases I'm involved in, maybe even less than I generally see.
For a utility with 1,400 customers and the revenues of Daufuskie Island Utility, that seems reasonable to you?
I just, you had asked in a rate in rate cases that I see generally discovery requests in that range. I have not done a comparison or how that compares to smaller companies.
And go ahead. And in fact, you didn't consider any smaller companies in your proxy group, did you?
The companies in my proxy group are all publicly traded companies. Where I did consider smaller companies, as I had mentioned in my testimony summary, was how they're being attractive and being acquired around the country. Yes, and including some companies that have less than 1,000 customers.
And if I understood you correctly, you cited a 2020 August article for that premise?
That one I cited was 2020. That's right.
Do you have any more recent information that stands for the same proposition upon which you rely?
Let me check. I believe I did.
I see you looking. Are you reviewing your testimony?
Looking at my direct testimony. If you give me a moment, I believe I. I also mentioned a Bluefield research report from 2021.
What month from 2021?
I don't have the month here. I just know it was 2021.
Did
Where
you?
it said,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you.
Mr.
Did-
Gressett, recognize there is a small delay
Right.
with the virtual witnesses, please. Thank you.
Mr. Ross,
that study from Bluefield that said there were 210 water utilities and asset acquisitions in 2021 were small, so about 78% of the 210.
okay. And did any of those utilities purchased require their investors to personally guarantee debts of the utility?
I'm not aware of that.
Do you think that would make a difference in whether an investor would choose to invest in that utility?
I think I addressed in my testimony that if a utility is struggling to earn its authorized ROE, that would impact investors' decision.
That's not my question, though. My question is if a purchaser of a utility is required to personally obligate his or herself for the debts of the utility, do you think that would impact an investor's willingness to invest in that utility?
Not on its own. It would depend the reason why.
Did any of the investors in any of the transactions you relied upon have to personally obligate themselves for the debts of the utilities in which they invested?
I'm not aware. I have been involved in cases where, in Pennsylvania, where that was the case, where the investors. Actually, let me correct that. I'm not positive on that. I know that there were some cases where the investors had to did have to personally guarantee loans. That is true, but I'm not aware in these studies. I think I had mentioned I did not see them mention that issue.
So you did not consider in your proxy analysis whether or not the proxy companies were comparable to DIUC with regard to requirement of investor personal guarantee of financing?
Not personal guarantee specifically, but I'm involved in an Aquarian water case in Connecticut now, where the company since our last rate case had acquired 4 what they called non-economically viable companies. So I didn't hear about personal loans, but these were companies that were acquired that were financially struggling. But I didn't hear in that case either whether the owners had to personally guarantee.
Do you understand there to be a difference between personal guarantees on financing and a struggling utility?
If I would think they would be related, but I guess I just want to make it clear I did not see in any of my I didn't see that in any of my studies personal guarantees. But from if a company if the investors are required to provide a personal guarantee, from my experience that would be related to the performance of the company. That's why I tie those two together, and I know also Daufuskie has been struggling to earn their authorized ROE. So if those aren't connected, then they may not be, but they would seem to be connected to me.
Okay, but you did not consider whether or not any of the investment opportunities in the proxy group you cited would require personal guarantees of debt, did you?
No, I didn't.
Do you have any opinion about why Daufuskie has not earned the predicted ROE since the last rate case?
That's beyond the scope of my testimony. I don't investigate why Daufuskie has not earned their authorized ROE.
But you assume that things like personal guarantees of loans and poor performance are linked, correct?
They would be, and it would that would generally suspect would be related. Yes, I didn't see any evidence presented otherwise that those were unrelated. And it seems generally it would be related. If there's evidence that discusses that, I'd be happy to see it. But I did not see any in the record that would that they're not somehow related.
Did you consider any of the testimony in this record that Daufuskie Island Utility has never paid a dividend since its inception in 1985?
I recall reading that.
And did you factor that into any of your analysis?
No.
Why not?
There's no. My role is to calculate what the cost of equity is for the company based on the evidence, and whether the company, what the company chooses in terms of paying dividends or not, their dividend policy is a separate issue. If a company is choosing to reinvest those funds instead of paying a dividend or not, that will generally not impact the cost of equity.
Well, I appreciated earlier that you testified about things potentially being related. Do you think that your conclusion that Daufuskie Island is struggling might be linked to its lack of payment of any dividends?
That wouldn't surprise me.
And so, therefore, both of those things would impact an investor's decision, correct?
Yes, if a company is struggling financially, an investor would certainly notice that. That would be one of the first things that they would notice.
Okay. And if I understand your testimony correctly, you believe it's appropriate to calculate Daufuskie's cost of equity based on your proxy group of larger publicly traded water and wastewater companies, correct?
Yes.
And am I correct that one of the reasons for that is because you believe that evidence indicates that investors do not demand higher expected return on equity to invest in small companies as compared to larger ones?
Yes.
What evidence indicates that?
In my direct testimony, I cite, I think it was ARQ Capital, to look exactly, had done a study because there was a conception that small companies had a higher cost of equity. But when they did a further analysis, that wasn't true. It was just there were certain time periods when people studied that there were higher returns for smaller companies. But when they looked deeper, there was not. Investors did not demand a higher return for smaller companies.
And when you say there were time periods when the requirements for were higher, do you know what controlled those time periods?
What controlled those time periods? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you said that there were time periods when a greater ROE was required, right?
No, it was. To be clear about that, it wasn't that they found that in the research was investigating the cost of equity over time. It was investing the actual returns for the companies, and I can read from that. It said a 2018 study conducted by scholars at AQR Capital Management and Yale University found that the size effects diminished shortly after its discovery and publication. The authors of this research found that the data errors plagued the early studies regarding the relationship between firm size and return. So that's critical, between the firm size and return, because one way, a lot of the studies that I've seen about the firm size, they analyze past historical returns. The idea is if small firms earn a higher return over considerable time, that may indicate that investors demand a higher return. And this study, they found that the data in the earlier studies did not include delisted companies. And since smaller firms are delisted more often than larger ones, the biased data made the returns of smaller stocks look higher than reality. In light of this recent data, as I had mentioned, Mr. Costello's use of an implied premium for size of the company is not appropriate.
Have you read any studies published since the 2018 study you just quoted on this issue?
I have not seen any studies in recent years, other than just, as I mentioned, seeing in 2020 and 2021 the report that there's been a lot of interest in small water companies, and I'm seeing that in a lot of the cases that I'm working in around the country. Small water and wastewater firms are very attractive now.
Have you ever been to Daufuskie Island?
No.
Do you understand that Daufuskie Island has no bridges to it?
I've been told that, yes.
Okay, and so do you understand that every transport to the island has to occur by boat?
Without a bridge, that would make sense, yeah.
Okay, and based on just that limited information, wouldn't you think operating a business there would be more expensive?
I wouldn't doubt it.
Wouldn't you suggest to a potential investor that investing in a utility on such an island would be riskier than another off-island utility, just based on that fact?
Higher operating costs, the utility is able to charge consumers for higher operating costs. That doesn't necessarily mean any additional risk.
Okay, so the rates would be higher on an island like Daufuskie because it's separated from land with no bridges.
Yeah, if the operating costs are higher, that should be passed on to consumers. Utility investors should are able to compensate, or are able to be compensated for their operating expenses.
That's because even investors who invest in a utility on an island separated from land without a bridge are entitled to the same returns that the legal precedent you cited earlier guarantees them, correct?
Yes, they're able to charge consumers for the operating expenses. If they're higher on an island, they can do that, and then they can also charge for their cost of capital. Yes.
What is your relationship with the Department of Consumer Affairs? Is it by the case, by the year? How does it work?
I'm hired on a case-by-case basis.
How much have you charged them for your work in this case?
Objection. I don't see the relevance of, just as Mr. Costello said, the relevance to his son's testimony, his son's salary. Mr. Rothschild also has to submit bids to different agencies, and we are not seeking to recover his cost in this case.
I understand your objection, but it is a fair question on cross. I think it's a little bit different than what was requested of asking for a W-2 form of an employee of a management company. So I'm going to overrule the objection, Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Mr. Rothschild, how much have you charged the department for your work in this case?
I won't know until the case is done in terms of how much I will charge, because I charge on an hourly basis. The contract, if I remember correctly, is a not to exceed $35,000.
And what is your hourly rate?
$280.
And do you think the ultimate amount for your work will be close to the $35,000 limit?
I don't know yet. I haven't prepared the invoice. I don't know.
Have you prepared any invoices yet for your work in this case?
I believe I have.
How many other cases? How many other cases have you been contracted by the Department of Consumer Affairs in South Carolina to work?
There was 6. This is my 7th case. I've been contracted in 6 other proceedings
Over how many years?
since the beginning of 2020.
And 7 cases over a year and 3 quarters. How many other cases similar did you have during that period?
I guess I should be also clear that I have other people at my firm, so this is not my income for myself. Just to be clear. Yeah.
How many other projects similar to those 7 did you have?
Commissioner, I'm going to object again. I'm not seeing the relevance here to his ROE recommendation. If you want to tell me what the relevance is.
I'm thinking we're getting a little far afield. I can understand asking an expert for their rate with regard to any kind of bias or going forward, but when we're getting beyond South Carolina, I'm not sure I see the relevance there.
My only purpose in asking with questions was to determine what percentage of his work is owed to DCA for the purpose of bias analysis.
Well, can we ask him that and not the other?
In the
So estimate what percentage of the Rothschild Financial's revenues
since the beginning of 2020, yes.
Maybe 30%, 20% to 30%.
And are you speaking of your time or your company's revenue?
I guess it would be about the same percentage-wise, because generally I have a business partner, and we're generally at we share 50-50. We have other costs too, but because we share about 50-50, the percentages would be the same.
Okay. Did anybody else in your company do any work on this project with you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Edgar Bandera is my partner.
Okay. And in the course of your work on this case, did you communicate with any employee of the Office of Regulatory Staff?
I didn't communicate directly with, that I recall, with RS. I just speak with DCA that I recall.
And do the guys at DCA tell you what they anticipate ORS is going to put in their pre-filed testimony?
We, I don't know what, I didn't know what ORS was going to do beforehand. No, I did not know.
Are you confident that if your recommendation for COE is used to set the rates in this case, that Daufuskie will be able to attract capital investors?
Yes, based on my analysis, I am. And of course, I'm reviewing the evidence that the company provided. And when someone goes and lists authorized ROEs in other jurisdictions, that were some of these things were out of date, not consistent with current policies, and when people when also talking about a company not being able to earn their authorized ROE, therefore they need a higher ROE. Based on that evidence, yes, I'm confident, because those arguments were not valid.
Have you ever engaged in any analysis of the COE opinions you have offered during a rate case as to whether the utility did in fact earn that rate?
Again, it's important that my analysis is based on investor expectations. And if a company is not able to earn their authorized ROE, that is often it's not something that I investigate. It's something for generally the accounting witnesses that I'll work with at times to investigate why, and if I've heard it's important to deal with that problem if a company's under earning. But I think it would be very problematic to look and say, let's look at the companies that aren't able to earn their authorized ROE and give them a higher ROE would be potentially rewarding underperformance. I think that would be very problematic.
I appreciate that, but if I understand you correctly, you have no real-world analysis of whether the COEs you have recommended in your cases were actually achieved.
No, I have not done that analysis.
Just one moment, please. That's all we have for the applicant. Thank you for your time and answering my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gressett. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Rothschild?
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Mr. Rothschild.
Good afternoon.
I just have a couple of questions. Have you been listening to the earlier testimony of the witnesses?
Off and on, quite a bit, but not the entire time.
Well, this morning, Mr. White, I was trying to understand how the $1 million owed to Mr. Guastella and how the money that the owners keep putting in, in your opinion, how should that be used as far as capital structure, rate of return, or should it be involved or not in that determination?
In terms of their actual capital structure, should they consider the funds that were put in by the owners? Is that correct?
The owners, and Mr. Guastella claims he's owed about $1 million, as well as they're owed some of the funds from these different hearings that they're trying to recover. Should these funds be included in the determination of capital structure and rate of return?
I think money that's put in by the owners, if it's recorded as equity, in terms of determining their actual capital structure, I think would be reasonable to consider. And I don't know all the facts of the money that's owed, the $1 million that's owed to Mr. Guastella. But if that was calculated as potentially an equity investment in terms of the owners, it might be okay to count that. But it's important that a utility is obligated to have their capital structure result in a rate of return that's as low as possible. So that's why I recommended using the average capital structure of the companies in my proxy group. I did say also that the ORS witnesses' capital structure recommendation would be reasonable, but I didn't see that kind of analysis or evidence that indicated that their equity-rich request was reasonable.
Okay. And you understand that this is owned by 3 people, and I know we have to think about investors' expectation in making calculations, but you understand they're not seeking investors at this time.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rothschild.
Good afternoon.
Have a follow-up question in connection with what Commissioner Powers just asked. You said you were heard some of what was going on in those discussions of money being basically loaned to Daufuskie Island Utility. And you were kind of, I think, addressing it as should that be part of the equity part of the capital structure. I was wondering, should it be included as long-term debt on the balance sheet? I mean, we heard some testimony that said some of it was had been out there for a long time, some of it maybe not as long. So basically, we don't really know how much either way, but if in fact people are loaning money long-term to the utility, should that, in your opinion, be part of the debt on the balance sheet, long-term debt, part of the capital structure?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. It would depend how it was structured. If it is structured as debt, meaning that they would be first in line in terms of if the company goes into default, then it should be recorded as debt, because they would be that the money they're providing would be in essence debt. If they were second in line, meaning that the debt holders went first, then it would be in essence equity.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I have a few questions about your pre-file testimony, and looking at page 74 of your direct testimony, and I'm looking at the page number on the right-hand side of the page, not the one at the bottom. Is that something that you have available, or are you looking at the one with the page number at the bottom of the page?
I can go to the one that's of the PDF, page 74 of the PDF.
Yes, there's a 2-page difference. Page 74 shows up at the bottom of the page. It's page 72. So I think that's kind of consistent depending on which one you want to look at.
Yes, I'm there on page 72 at the bottom. Yeah.
Okay. So on lines 3 through 14, you explain why you use the yields on both the 3-month and the 30-year Treasury bonds in your CAPM analysis. And you state that the 30-year Treasury bond yield has an established non-zero beta. And so what is the value of the beta for the yield on a 30-year Treasury bond?
Good question. People usually don't ask that. It's about negative 0.3 when we calculated it. Or was I think negative 0.25? I'd have to say, right in that range. I know I saw that was consistent with some publications by Bloomberg I'd seen about 10 years ago, but I didn't see them publish it, so we recalculated ourselves, and we were in that range, about negative 0.25 to negative 0.3.
Okay. And does the non-zero beta create a problem when you're using the CAPM analysis?
I think so. I think that when we say risk-free in the world of CAPM, risk-free would mean a zero beta. You go to a beta of 1, you have about the risk of the overall market. 0 would be risk-free. So in that sense, I think that is more consistent with the theory behind the CAPM. But as I explained, we like to look at, or I like to look at both, especially in the times when the yield curve was so steep in the past. Now the yield curve is so flat. When the CAPM analysis, it doesn't matter so much which one you choose. But that's why I look at both, because it's good to see. But if we're going to be as consistent with the CAPM completely, I think it should be a zero beta security, and that's with 3 months. When you calculate the 3 month U.S. Treasury bills, the beta is zero. I think it's like 0.01, so in essence zero.
Okay. So on page 75, again, I guess that's page 73 at the bottom. On lines 17 through 20, you state that in your CAPM analysis, you use two betas, a forward beta and a hybrid beta. Can you please explain the difference in the two betas and the impact that they have on the model's outcomes?
Yeah, so I'm going to make sure I'm in the right spot.
I'm not following his page number.
I don't know why I can't find exactly. I see on mine on the bottom, page 75, it says beta. What beta did you use in your CAPM?
Well, I was talking about the forward beta and the hybrid beta and the difference between the two and the impact on the model's outcome, which, let's see if I can find that. I guess it's on page,
Commissioner Thomas, I think it's page 75 at the bottom, but 77 on the watermark on the side.
okay.
I think might be where you are.
I had the wrong page. Sorry about that. So did you see that?
Yeah. So the first question, what's the difference between the hybrid and the forward beta? Would that be?
Well, what's the impact of the difference between the two betas on the model's outcomes?
In this case, very little, almost nothing in terms of the difference. Maybe about 9 basis points. So if you look at on page 98 at the bottom, there's a table 8. You can see that. Did you see the table 8? Or just let me know when you're there.
Okay, I'm working on getting there.
Okay.
Finally there.
Okay. So what we have there shows the comparison of the forward beta and then the one that's a historical blend, and you can see that the forward is 0.76, and the one that we have is the historical blend is 0.77. So the difference is really doesn't make really much of a difference at all in terms of looking at a blend of historical being a hybrid and looking at the forward. There's very little difference. In this case, over time, depending on capital market, those can be quite different. So I like to take the forward beta. The real attractive nature is that it's based on investor expectations, and we want the cost of equity to be based on investors' current expectations, where the historical may or may not, historical betas based on what the market's done in the past may or may not be what investors expect now. But based on the analysis here at the end of August, they're almost the same. 0.77 for the historical, 0.76 for the forward, and the CAPM results, as you can see on the bottom there, for the 3 month Treasury vary between 896 and 887. And when we use the 30-year, the range is between 904 and 912. If you go down to the next page on table 9, that's the one we just looked at was based on that one was based on using the spot rates, and below is looking at the top one is based on the average of a 3-month weighted, and the bottom is based on the spot rate. And you can see that the spot result is higher, but still, once again, the difference between the forward beta and the hybrid is a little bigger, but still quite small.
Okay. So, what's generally the traditional beta estimate that's used for in the traditional sense of the CAPM analysis?
Well, in regulatory proceedings, generally what I've seen most of the time is using a 5-year historical beta. In terms of investors, I've never heard of an investor using that from any investor I've ever heard. But in the utility proceedings, what I've seen most of the time is Value Line's 5-year historical betas.
Okay, so why is it better to use the S&P 500 index rather than the New York Stock Exchange composite as the Value Line does when you're coming up with your values for beta in the CAPM?
Using New York Stock Exchange would be fine if your risk premium is also based on the New York Stock Exchange. The reason is just consistency. So my risk premium, and that's actually quite common, is to do a risk premium based on the S&P 500. So if you're not consistent with what you're calculating your beta and where you're calculating your risk premium, that's problematic. And FERC has identified that issue as well, and has been asking. I don't know where it is right now, but FERC has identified that issue and expressed potentially making sure that whatever beta is being calculated, it's on the same index as the risk premium.
Okay, and you were asked just a moment ago, did you believe that the utility would be able to maintain its financial integrity and attract capital at the ROE that you estimated from the financial models? And understood that you said yes. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I just put one caveat in terms of if the company is not able to earn their authorized ROE because of issues with how the company is run, that's beyond the scope of my testimony. Of course, any company could be poorly run and struggle financially. But I'm confident that my result, based on the evidence I've seen, based on capital markets and all the evidence I've seen, that it's consistent with their market-based cost of capital, their cost of equity, and cost of debt.
All right, and I believe that you've, in your SIR rebuttal, and I believe you've already stated that taking the ORS capital structure is a reasonable option to taking your capital structure. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be, if the commission would like to be conservative, I think that would be fine, because it is based on the capital structure ratios of the same proxy group that I use. It's just that I was using the capital structure ratios that are currently being used by the companies, and that analysis, I believe, was an average over the past 5 years. So it's certainly a reasonable way to calculate the capital structure.
And also, do you think it would be acceptable or reasonable to take your ROE and ORS capital structure? Would that be fair to the investors in Daufuskie?
Yes, I would. One point that I mentioned in my testimony is that there is a relationship between the cost of equity and financial risk. So when I calculated my cost of equity, it was based on the capital structure ratios of the company, based on the capital structure ratios of the companies in my proxy group. So it would be appropriate to, based on the calculations I make, to bring down their cost of equity a little bit, because that would be more of an equity-rich capital structure that I'm recommending. So I think that it would be reasonable to bring down my cost of equity recommendation a little bit. But given that this analysis they did was based on the capital structure ratios of this group, although it was just more of a historical analysis, that would not be, it would be okay to not do that. I think it would be most appropriate to bring down my my recommended ROE a little bit, but that it could be reasonable also if the commission would like to be conservative to keep my ROE recommendation and go with ORS's capital structure recommendation.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Caston, I see your light.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Mr. Rothschild.
Good afternoon.
And this has already been touched on, but I think Attorney Gressett, you guys had a little discussion on this ROE and with Commissioner Thomas just now. I was looking at, I guess, your direct testimony and your rebuttal. And I think I get the distinction. I just want to make sure I get the distinction where you say DIUC's cost of equity, and this is in your direct testimony on page 104. Cost of equity and its capacity to earn its authorized ROE are completely different concepts. Its cost of equity is related to the return investors require to provide capital for an investment of equivalent risk. On the other hand, DIUC's ability to earn its authorized ROE is related to its management's ability to keep costs down while operating the company efficiently. And in your rebuttal, responding to Mr. Guastella's claim that you don't consider the significance of the, I guess, address a significant shortfall. All of this, if I'm understanding this, your rebuttal and the questions that are asked is the ROE in the range that you say you developed with your methods is reasonable for a utility that is well managed and operates efficiently in an economical way to attract investors, should that be the case. Is that what's being said here in this direct and in the rebuttal? Or am I reading too much into that?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. It's I think that's one way certainly to put it, as a utility that's that was run well. I think we would have to be careful to if a company has a higher cost of capital because it's run poorly. I don't think in general that would be. I mean, that goes. I mean, I'm gonna say this because it really is related to the kind of the underlying principles of what I do. So this is, I view obviously the role of the commission to make this decision, but I think that it would be dangerous to award if a company has a higher cost of capital because it's poorly run. That would be dangerous to do, to give them a higher ROE. It would be that it would be for a company that's run well. If there's some inherent characteristics about the company that's beyond management's control that impacts their cost of capital, then that would be legitimate. But if it's because something management is doing and they're not earning an authorized ROE, then that shouldn't lead to just a higher ROE. I'll give you one example: is Pacific Gas and Electric. My analysis indicates that the largest utility in California does have a higher cost of capital, but a lot of that is because of their own mismanagement in terms of causing some wildfires and other problems. So I was arguing there that they should not be able to earn that, because it was pretty clear we could show that it was basically on the moment that investors realized that they were going to be responsible for potential liabilities from fires that they caused. You can see on a dime, their cost of equity went up like within a day. So I think it's pretty clear it was related to that. So I thought that was just a good example where the two kind of the cost of equity and management's influence potentially on their cost of equity.
Okay. And on page 6, in your conclusion of your rebuttal, where you give your recommendation of 8.47% and the range 7.58 to 9.36 for ROE. Your ROE range and ORS's ROE range, that's hard to say. ROE range, alliteration, to be very similar. Did you derive your range independently of ORS?
Oh, yes. I had no coordination with them, yes.
All I wanted to know. All righty, yes. Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further questions for the witness? Mr. Hall, any redirect?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Rothschild, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
You may stand down. Mr. Hall, is that complete?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pringle, on behalf of Intervenor Property Owners Association?
Chair Belzer.
We may need a second to, let me see if we've got, your witness is virtual, right?
That is correct.
Jeff Garwood.
Okay, looks like we've got him. You want to call your witness?
Yes. POAs call Mr. Jeff Garwood.
Mr. Garwood, hold with us just a minute. There we go. Good afternoon, Mr. Garwood.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you to state your name for me.
Jeff Garwood.
And would you raise your right hand and let me administer the oath, please? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may put your hand down. Mr. Pringle, you may proceed.
Mr. Garwood, if you would.
Excuse me, just a second. Mr. Garwood, could you get closer to the microphone or speak up? We're having a little trouble hearing you.
I can speak up. I don't know how to get closer to the microphone.
Okay. We're going to need you to.
I can belt as well as anybody. So.
All right. So that sounds good right there. If you can keep that level up for us so the court reporter can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, I will.
Mr. Garwood, good afternoon. Can you give your address, please?
Address is 55 Tabby Circle, Daufuskie Island, South Carolina, 29915.
Okay, and on whose behalf are you testifying today?
Testifying on behalf of the Hague Point members and those that are served by Daufuskie Island Utility here.
Okay. Tell the commission a little bit about your education and background.
Well, I had the pleasure of going to North Carolina State, and I became a chemical engineer in 1984. began work at DuPont in South Texas, where in fact I did meet my wife. I was working in the utilities area, and as would have it, I was responsible for the first 2 years of all of the processed water as well as boiler feed water treatment for the plant. This was a plant that was of significant size. And in fact, over the course of a year or so, developed, working with outside engineers, developed technologies to retrofit the water treatment part of the plant to improve on the boiler feed water quality. At that point, we got married. After the honeymoon, went to the University of North Carolina to get an MBA. I had a fantastic experience for a chemical engineer to begin understanding other parts of the world as it relates to financials. Certainly, as Mr. Rothschild just pointed out, it's complicated. I also had an opportunity there to be taught by a fantastic professor, John Pringle, who happens to be Jack Pringle's father. I left Chapel Hill and began work at McKinsey & Company. It's a management consulting firm. Was based in Houston, Texas. Worked there for 5 years on a wide variety of projects, wide variety of industries. Left and began to work at General Electric. I joined GE in the corporate area, had a variety of different jobs over the course of 20 years, and also had the opportunity to move 15 times. Our movement to Daufuskie Island full-time was our 19th since being married. After GE, well, the last job I had at GE was running GE's water and process technologies business. I imagine we may talk about that some during the course of the next bit of time. It's arguably, at the time, it was the widest, deepest set of technologies in the world. It's since been bought by Suez and then by Veolia most recently. And in the portfolio of GE Water, we had about $400 million of DIUC revenue. In other words, we had island and mainland treatments all over the world designed to fit customers' needs, delivering value-oriented, high-quality water to meet the requirements of the customers. After GE, I started a private equity fund, a Liberation Capital, that we provide modular, repeatable, decentralized waste-to-value project finance. During the course of the last 10, 12 years, we've financed a number of wastewater and water treatment assets around the world, but we've also done plastic recycle to hydrocarbon, asphalt recycle, variety of other things.
Okay. Have you caused to be pre-filed 5 pages of direct testimony in question and answer format?
I have, in fact.
Okay. Do you have any additions, deletions, or changes to make to your testimony?
I have only one, and it's really only a typo that I did. On the 3rd or 4th page, it talks about, in fact, conductivity, a measure of conducive. I forgot to put a T in there. It's not conducive ions in the water, it's conductive. That's, I don't actually know how to tell what page this is.
Okay, hold on.
Page 4 at the very top.
Page 4, line 4, where right now it reads, paren, a measure of conducive ions in the water. That should read a measure of conductive ions in the water.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any other changes to make to your direct testimony?
No, sir.
Let me suggest one more that would have been your attorney's error. On line 4 of page 1, equity is, in fact, only has one E, right? Or is there such a thing as equity? I'm joking.
It would be nice if it were equity,
okay.
but it's not very equal, and it is equity. So.
Okay, all right. With those, do you have any additional corrections or changes or deletions to make?
Sir.
Okay. If I asked you all the questions that appear in that testimony, would your answers be the same as appear therein?
Yes, sir, they would.
Okay. And did you also provide an exhibit, which is your executive biography?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Chair Belcher, I'd like to ask at this time that Mr. Garwood's pre-filed direct testimony be read into the record as if given orally from the stand as corrected.
Mr. Garwood's direct testimony, as corrected, will be entered into the record as if read from the stand.
Thank you. And in addition, that Mr. Garwood's exhibit to his direct testimony be marked for identification and entered in as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Garwood's Exhibit 1 that was attached to his pre-filed direct testimony will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 11 and received into the evidence of this case. Mr. Pringle, are you going to file corrected testimony tomorrow?
I would be thrilled to do so.
Thank you.
Yes. You want to hold a?
No, it'll just be just file it through the DMS
Okay.
and we'll get the corrected versions to the court reporter.
Okay, will do. Mr. Garwood, please present a summary of your direct testimony.
I'd be happy to. I've lived on Daufuskie now for 6 years. We bought here it's almost 23 years ago. And contra to some of the conversations earlier, living here is fantastic, and the incremental cost of operations or living here is marginal. I decided to become involved with the rate case as I learned about it, given my awareness of similar properties around the world and their associated operations, the type of technologies deployed, and the relative cost of delivering the service to the customers. And a number of things in the recent history have just brought me a little bit of concern as it relates to Daufuskie Island Utility Company's operations and their communications with customers. In working with DNR, we have in fact put in place a conductivity probe on the north end of the island that, to my knowledge, is the only monitor of quality of the incoming water on the island. I am unaware of any test methods at the Daufuskie Island Utility Company's wells, nor on the sewage treatment plant. It's not to say that it's not there or that they don't use outside agencies. I'm just not aware of it. I've asked to get the quality reports a couple of times. Paul Vogel, who, by the way, is presented here in the past, and he did pass away in recent times. Paul Vogel and I have been looking at saltwater intrusion as well. So between saltwater intrusion and wanting to get trends on quality of water, not that I've got big anxieties that we have bad quality water now, I would just want to watch the trends. The same goes for the trends on saltwater intrusion into the aquifer. As a result of some of the work that Paul and I did, we in fact have had a variety of alternative technologies reviewed for application on Daufuskie. Were saltwater intrusion to continue, or if we were to have a quality issue around the aquifer water, there would need to be markedly different treatment to the well water as it currently is treated by Daufuskie Island Utility. The difference is treatable in many different ways, many of which I'm familiar with. The relative cost of some of these new technologies are significantly lower.
Just a moment, please.
Excuse me.
Ms. Ivy?
Is this mic on?
Yes.
I'd like to object. This line of testimony, particularly the cost with these alternatives, is entirely outside of his direct testimony.
Okay.
Mr. Pringle, would you keep your witness within
Sure.
the pre-file? Thank you.
Let's just stick within what's in that pre-file.
I apologize. Being aware of what alternatives are versus what is happening now, any anxiety that folks would have on saltwater intrusion or on quality issues or on biological intrusion could be dealt with different technologies. I also have had personal and am aware of a number of other cases where there were reports of damaged or leaky or otherwise assets. In general, the response from DIUC has been inadequate. In some cases, they did follow through and complete the satisfaction of the customer. In several cases, they were not able to do so. I can speak to myself. We had sewage flood our basement. In fact, that happened at another home just this last week, and was told that it was not sewage associated with DIUC. There's no other sewage on the island, by the way. And we ended up having to do the repair and then had recovery from another group that was doing some service work on the island. In closing, as far as the testimony, I think that the services to the customers and the associated cost to the customers have an opportunity to be improved. And the improvement can be in the degree of communication, the degree of awareness of activities and quality of influent and customer water, as well as the quality of the sewage treatment plants that are both in Hague Point and in Bloody Point. And they should all have communications to the customers, given the nature of being on an island, and in many places across the United States, they're required communications at the end of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Garwood.
That summarizes.
Yeah,
please.
one more. Let me mention one more point. That's does your direct testimony also discuss generator fuel tanks?
In fact, when we had a person from GE Water, he's a technology professional.
Let me ask you about what you said in your direct testimony about generator fuel tanks. Yeah. On page 5.
We were looking at the generators and the well water and tested or checked whether or not there was fuel for the generators on site. And in fact, at both places, there was not.
Okay. Please answer any questions that the parties or the commissioners may have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pringle. Department of Consumer Affairs?
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff?
No questions for Mr. Garwood, thank you.
Daufuskie Island Utilities? Thank you. Just a moment, Mr. Garwood, while council gets to the podium.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Garwood. Can you hear me?
Ms. Ivy,
Barely, but I can.
I need for you to talk into that microphone, please.
Is this any better, Mr. Garwood?
A little bit better, but thank you. I can hear you fine.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Ivy, and I'm here for the utility. Mr. Garwood, did you observe the proceedings yesterday?
I did not.
Okay. Did Mr. Pringle share with you that there was a lot of discussion about you yesterday?
In fact, he did not.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, I'd like to follow up on some of those questions that were asked yesterday, in addition to some of the issues that you've identified in your pre-filed testimony. Mr. Garwood, can you please tell me how it came to be that you were involved in this matter?
I live here. We got a letter that the prices were going up, and I don't think that the old prices are correct. So a higher price yet, given the treatment methods that they utilize, is inappropriate.
Okay.
Therefore, I got involved, as I have done in most things in most of my life.
Did you object to the 2014 rate application?
I don't recall.
Okay. How about the 2011 rate application?
In both cases, I lived elsewhere and paid my bills as they came in, and probably wasn't even aware that there was a rate increase plan.
Okay. What is your position within the Hague Point Property Owners Association?
A person who lives here.
Okay, you're a member?
I am.
Are you an officer?
I am not.
Are you on the board?
I am not.
Okay. What authority?
I am on the Sustainability Committee, which is responsible for thinking about conservation around water, energy, etc. The coastline, which I can look out my window here and look at it, and a variety of other things. But it's a relatively new committee, and it's we're developing plans and actions to ensure that that we as users and people who live on the island treat it as it should be treated.
What authority do you have to speak on the members' collective behalf today?
Other than experience and the fact that the 8 or 10 people that were on there was a committee formed here to understand how best to respond to the rate increase. I was asked to fill out a testimony. This is the first time I've ever done it, and this is the first time I've ever spoken to a utility commission. So it wasn't based on my expertise that I was asked. I suppose it was based on work experience and the fact that I know as much about water as anybody that's on the island.
Okay. And where I'm going with this, sir, is I'm just trying to get an idea of whether the concerns and opinions that you express are true of every member of the Hague Point Association, or whether it's reflective, for example, of a majority of those members, or whether it's just purely your personal opinions and concerns.
I can't speak for everyone because I haven't talked to everyone, but I flipped a golf cart 6 months ago tomorrow and was in pretty bad damage. And I am able to say that today on walks, I was stopped 4 or 5 times by random folks in golf carts and asked, well, when are you doing your testimony? I said, well, I think it's going to be today. They said, well, we'll be thinking about you. Just do the best you can. And I won't go into it because you'll probably say you shouldn't say anything. But I can safely say that those that are here are anxious about the notion of additional rates given the service levels that have been delivered.
Sorry to hear about your golf cart accident.
I can give more detail. You'll really be. It was quite the adventure.
I'll call you later to catch the case.
Indeed.
Prior to your submission or completion of this pre-filed testimony, did you share any drafts of this or the actual final prepared draft with the members of the Hague Point Association?
I worked with Jack Pringle to put this together. Oh, I sent him some bullets, and then we wrote it up, and he shared it with all of the people that were on the committee as identified by the president of Hague Point.
Okay, and what was that committee? Was that the sustainability committee or a different committee?
It was folks who wanted to make sure that the rate increase was dealt with as we would like it to be, and that it would therefore be as low, if not a reduction in rates, and that we would have improvements in service.
Okay, and who's on that committee?
A variety of people.
Can you name them for me, please?
Doug Egley, Jack Pringle, Dr. Watson, John Donaldson. I'm going to need to go look at a distribution to be able to go much beyond that.
Let me see if I can help you here, but maybe I can ask this a different way. So in reviewing the public transcript, I know Dr. Watson spoke, Mr. Donaldson spoke.
Yep.
I believe there was a gentleman named Adam, maybe Adam Jones.
Adam Martin.
Adam Martin, yep, he was the first speaker.
So he's the marketing guy here. He's on Doug Egley's staff. Who else?
And where I was
can try to remember, but what would you like to know their names for?
I'm trying to get a sense of how many Hague Point members or Daufuskie residents share your opinions.
Well, none of them have my work experience. The observations of damaged pipes, I got an email today. Tell them that at the corner in Melrose, at the corner of this road and this road, that there's been a leak that's been going on for 2.5 years and the water's running out of the ground right now. I don't even know where that is, but the guy sent it to me because, I'm familiar with a number of damages associated with an overpressure in Melrose where it burst faucets and fittings in a number of homes. And the person that came to fix it was from the water utility, and they said, yeah, sorry, that was our fault. I'm familiar with folks in Bloody Point who have learned that their sewage treatment plant is draining into the creek that goes into the sound. They're pretty not that happy. I can't go much further than that because I didn't go and get testimony from very many people or run a ballot as to whether or not they viewed what I wrote was appropriate.
Okay, that's fair enough. Tell me about some of the concerns. We've spoken about a few: quality, service, communication, keeping track of certain trends. I assume cost is another concern residents have. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. What about the availability of a service provider?
What do you mean?
Is there any concern that what happened with what I understand to be, I think it was called the Melrose utility that went under, is there a concern among residents that you may at one point end up with a defunct or unoperational service provider and have no utility?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to go back. My understanding is International Paper built the plant. They put the pipes in. There was extensions by other developers. And so, in fact, there may have been a Melrose bankrupt entity, but it was fundamentally linked together at the outset. Are there concerns of a defunct platform? I would say no. I've actually had people say, why don't you buy it and we can have other people operate it? And I said, well, I'm not in that business anymore. So the notion of an alternative, whether it be shallow wells for alternative irrigation or, having a desal plant that we can ensure we've got the quality of water, whether it be from a well or from the sound out here, those are conversations that people have with me way more often than you'd figure, given that we mostly play pickleball, eat out, and play golf here. And so if you begin to have conversations with people about, well, do you think we're going to have any water issues going forward, or why is the price going up? I mean, the notion of the frequency of those conversations is such that I can't say that it's everybody's view, but there's not a whole lot of things out here you got to worry about.
How do the Hague Point POA members' priorities rank? Is cost of utility the motivating factor? Is quality of water the motivating factor? Service?
I can't honestly answer the question. I didn't ask them, and I'm not on the POA, but it would be impossible for the two that you just mentioned not to be pretty important.
I'd like to discuss your testimony with respect to water safety and water quality.
Okay.
Do you have your pre-filed testimony in front of you?
I can get it. I'm on a computer. So, yes, ma'am, I do now.
Do you still see me, or can you see a document?
I can move it down, and I can see you now. Let me try to move you up. There we go. And I'm happy to maneuver wherever you would like me to.
Yes, sir. If you could please look at page 2, beginning on line 8.
Describe the importance of water quality to Daufuskie Island residents.
Yes, sir. And I just want to obtain some clarification. Is it your testimony that the residents of Daufuskie Island are not receiving clean, safe drinking water?
No. I actually just said that to you a few minutes ago.
Okay. What about high quality water? Do you contend that the current water that you're receiving is not high quality?
The aquifer has water that is as clean as any that I'm familiar with for surface water or aquifer water anywhere in the world. The treatment required to have this water go to the house is nominal. the charges are high, but the treatment is nominal. The issues will become if there are quality issues associated with either the aquifer or the wells from which that transfers the water to the surface. This aquifer has historically been pressurized higher than, I mean, it was able to have, if it had a hole in the aquifer, it would have a freshwater plume into the Atlantic Ocean, okay? That no longer has, because Savannah draws a lot of water, likely a lot of other reasons, but they draw a lot of water. Therefore, there's a vacuum and there's saltwater intrusion. Hilton Head used to, that's just right there. So Hilton Head used to have 100% of its water from this aquifer as well. They now do desalination to make up, I think it's 50% of the water from the well, and 50% of the water is desalination. Buck Island, just over to the north of Hilton Head, is 100% desalination water. So the notion that there will be an evolution of water quality over time is a given, wherever you are in the world. The notion that we should be able to track the quality of the water, well, it's very standard methods. I mean, look at silica, hardness, sulfur, chlorides, and all of which can be done with a couple of very simple machines, or you can use an outside lab. Or the way it currently is, I need to take a water sample and take it to an outside lab. There are no published documents of water quality that I'm aware of since we've moved here full-time 6 years ago.
Is DIUC required to do all that you would like it to do?
My understanding is yes. Public utilities are supposed to be able to provide water quality and water volumes, especially in cases like this, where there is a limit to the amount of water that can be taken from the aquifer. Those limits, we've asked about them over the last year and a half because we've been looking at alternative water sources. And so if Daufuskie Island Utility has water quality measurements, or if they have measurements of quantity, which they have to because that's how the bills go out, they're not provided to customers, or at least I, as a customer who have been with groups that have asked for those things, they've not been provided. They may have been provided to others, maybe they provide them internally, but given that we have a significantly higher cost of water than when I bought here 23 years ago, and it's the same exact equipment. Why? Because I looked at buying the utility myself when I was at GE. We were conceptually gonna do islands along the Atlantic coast, just like we were doing islands in the Caribbean.
GE was going to buy the utility, not you.
No, I wish that I had the forethought to have done so, but no, I was being the CEO of GE Water. We had 50, 60 different build, own, operate assets around on islands in the Caribbean and the Canaries. And we were examining how we could further expand that without having to go into other Caribbean islands.
Why did GE Water not acquire the utility?
They wouldn't sell it for $1.
They being the current owners?
International Paper.
Okay.
DIUC bought all of the assets from International Paper, and International Paper, it was named something different, but at the time, I knew it 20 years ago, but I don't know it now.
Have you reviewed DIUC's CCRs, which I understand to mean Consumer Confidence Reports and Compliance and Evaluation Inspections, CEIs?
I wouldn't know where to find them, so no, ma'am, I have not read them.
If you would, sir, please turn to page 5 of your testimony. I've just got a few more questions for you.
Okay.
I want to ask you about your concern about the generators.
Okay.
Mr. Garwood, how many fuel tanks are on the island?
I have no idea. Probably one per generator at least.
Do you know where they're located?
I know where the 2 generators are that we went to look at the days that I was looking at the well treatment locations.
Okay, and who was with you?
Paul Vogel and the technology rep from GE that I mentioned earlier. It was unanimous consent amongst the three of us that the tank was tapping hollow, let's call it.
And how did you determine that?
Tapped on the tank.
How did you obtain access to that area?
Parked my golf cart right beside it and walked over to it.
When was that?
Early last year, we were doing desalination presentations to the board and to anybody that lived on the island. It was under the notion of saltwater intrusion is coming. We got to be ready for it. And it was designed to make people less anxious about the idea that all of a sudden their drinking water was going to turn salty.
Do you know whether the generators operate every day?
I do not.
Is there a way you would be able to tell? Could you hear whether it's operating if you were standing next to it?
Probably. I mean, of course, if you're standing next to it, but they're in the woods, so I mean, you'd have to want to be around it to be able to hear it operate.
Okay. Were they operating when you went out to check the fuel tanks?
No, ma'am. There was no fuel, so if they wanted to operate them, it would be off of a very novel view of let's use air to run these things.
So you'd agree with me that if the generators are operating on a daily basis, there's fuel to operate them?
You would have to have fuel to operate them, yes.
Okay. Let's look at the end of your pre-filed testimony where you report a history of customers having difficulty dealing with DIUC. Can you please identify the various customers you're referring to?
The list would be interesting but irrelevant unless I mean, I can go through the people that have. No, it's not irrelevant. That's not my ability to judge that. Could you be more specific? Because if you're meaning places where people have had their basements or ground floor flooded, I can name, I don't know, 4 or 5. If it's exploding faucets and fixtures, I can name 3. If it's,
Let's go line if you don't mind. Let's start with customers who have contacted DIUC with no response.
Okay, that would be me, and it was also everybody that was on the committee to prepare for the response to the rate increase by DIUC. There is a prevalent view that if you contact DIUC, the best is via email. If you call, it'll most of the time goes to voicemail. There is one guy who said that he called I have to report an outage, a damaged something, and they answered on the 4th ring. That was given to me as an example just in the last couple of days. But I would say that in general, there are 2 people that are here on the island, and I know one of them well. He used to be the security guy at Hague Point. I've got his telephone number. So, but he can't answer billing or, saltwater intrusion plans or quality. That's not his. That's not what he would talk to you about.
Okay, and you think those types of inquiries, saltwater intrusion plans, quality, deserve immediate responses?
No, they should have responses. To date, I think they are 0 on all requests that I'm aware of. Here's an example. So we had, at the end of last year, I got a bill for $4,000. It was $3,000 for irrigation. I had turned the irrigation off in September. I did. So I know that it was turned off. And so I contacted and they said, okay, we'll get back to you. I didn't get it back to. And so I contacted Tim Salem. I said, Tim, something's wrong, because the amount of water that's required to generate this type of a bill would be 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Okay? I turned the irrigation off. He says, you know what? Let me check your meter, and I'll talk to them. We've upgraded software, and in fact, that was what the issue was, is the software system somehow read things differently. Apparently it got fixed, because the bills have gone back to being just a couple $1,000 every quarter. So I that being an example, I can again speak to hearsay from others, but I don't systemically track people who've contacted DIUC. DIUC should in fact systemically track contacts and speed of response, as do most folks who worry about customer issues.
Mr. Garwood, when you moved onto the island, approximately how many homes were there?
Say, I don't know, 20 less than are right now, I guess.
And that was 22 years ago when you bought your property?
No, we bought here in 2000, and we moved here. It'll be 6 years in March. And I volunteer at the museum. I generally will say 250 homes in Hague Point, about half that in Melrose, and about half that again in Bloody Point. And then in the historic district, there's about the same number as in Melrose. I don't know that those are accurate, but that's how I answer when people say, how many people live on Daufuskie?
Okay. So you knew it would be a small number of people shouldering the cost of utilities on the island, didn't you?
Very well phrased question. Let's start with energy first. So Dominion provides energy to the island at the same rates as the rest of the area. Being familiar with water in a number of different places, and having had received bills for approximately, I don't know, 15 years before we moved here, I knew what the historic cost was. I never asked them to have lower service or lower costs. But since moving here, there have been a number of rate increases. And we're bordering on some of the most expensive water that I'm familiar with anywhere in the world. But to answer your question, there's good things and bad things about being on a limited population island. No, I did not think that there would be an issue with the ability to shoulder the costs of the assets that I had looked at several years before on buying for GE. They don't take that much to operate. They don't take that much cost to operate.
And I think what I was getting at, sir, was more about the number of customers. It is very much the island's character to preserve the natural, undeveloped.
Have you been out here?
I've only been by boat.
Okay, so that is a great statement. If you come out here, it's as active, it's as developed as people want it to be. If you want to be in an undeveloped area, you can go lie down in the swamp, you can go walk through the woods. There's any number of things that you can do. If you want to play pickleball every day at 3:30, there's going to be a game. If you want to play golf, you can do that. If you want to ride bicycles, enjoy the beach, you can do that. If you want to go to the church, my wife and I clean it every Saturday to get ready for the services on Sunday. We have from 50 to 80 people every week. So I think that the range of what to expect on Daufuskie is what you choose to put into it.
Sure.
And if you choose to come out here and enjoy nature and be separated from development, you can do that.
20 additional homes in how many years?
I mean, there's 17 in some form of construction right now.
When I asked you earlier, you said there's 20 more homes now than when you moved on to the
I
island.
apologize. It was a cynical response because I have no idea how many more homes. I responded instead by telling you what I tell people when they ask me while I'm volunteering at the museum, when they say, how many people live on Daufuskie? That's the answer that I give. I don't know that it's accurate by number of buildings. I've never actually been asked that question.
Okay. Your homeowners association, the Hague Point Homeowners Association,
Yes, ma'am?
do you have dues?
Yeah.
Tell me about your dues.
Pretty open question.
How much are
What do
they?
you want to know?
How much are they and when are they payable?
Well, we get a bill every month. So if you go out to eat at the beach club, or if you go get groceries up in the mansion, or if you take the water taxi to Harbor Town too many times, that shows up on your bill. Quarterly, there are a variety of I wouldn't call them dues. I mean, they're the cost of maintaining a food. It's the cost of maintaining a capital budget to address problems like hurricanes. So there is a very well-defined process by the Hague Point board and the president and his staff to put together a budget and have that reviewed with the community, and the community votes on whether or not that's the appropriate line item budget spend and whether or not there needs to be additional assessments.
How much did you pay the association last year?
I'd prefer not to answer if it's all the same.
Well, I'd like to know, you testified that the incremental cost of living on the island is minimal, I believe. This is just one reference point.
Yeah, no, the cost of dues at Hague Point are pretty significant. If you're living in Melrose, you don't have Hague Point dues. If you're living in Bloody, you don't have Hague Point dues. You don't have some of the benefits associated with the Hague Point area, but you can join the area if you would like.
Okay. So I don't have to ask you to share exactly what you spent. I'll represent to you. I looked online and it looked like it was about $14,000 a year in addition to an initiation fee and a percentage due on transfer. Does that sound about right?
For purposes of what you're doing, it does, but it's not accurate.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. We've been going, what, 2 hours? Let's take good point. But this most recent session, we've been going about 2 hours. So Mr. Garwood, would you bear with us while we take a 10-minute break, please? And we'll be back with you.
You would have me come back?
Yes, sir. Commissioners may have questions or there might be redirect from your counsel.
Oh, that's right. I apologize.
No, you're fine, sir. Just if you would indulge us, we would appreciate it.
That's fine. I'm just making corned beef and cabbage and vegetables. I need to go check on them. So.
What time is supper? Thank you, sir.
When I finish.
Okay.
When I have thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back at 5:05. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina and the hearing, continuation of the hearing in docket 2022-142-WS, the rate case application of Daufuskie Island Utilities Company Incorporated. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. We have Commissioner Urban virtually and present in the hearing room. We have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. We are in the examination of the Intervenor Property Owners Association's witness, Mr. Garwood. Mr. Garwood, do we have you online?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your indulgence for our short break. We are now at the point where if any commissioners have questions for you, so let me see who may have questions.
Chair Belser.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Mr. Garwood, good to meet you. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
I have a couple of sets of questions. One is from your testimony on page 4. You talk about the north end of Edisto Island, and you referenced in your just earlier, you referenced that this testing facility was installed by DNR. Is that Department of Natural Resources, a state entity?
Yes, ma'am. It's a lady, Brooke, who's come here. I met her with Paul Vogel several times. It's not a facility. It's a conductivity probe that is submersed into a test well that's associated with the aquifer that is a proxy for having a test at the wellhead of a DIUC production.
Who installed the well?
DNR.
Okay. And what's their purpose to the extent?
Excuse me. They installed the conductivity probe.
Okay.
And it is the well, I don't know who put it in, but it has to have gone in, I would envision, when the piping system got put in. So I would envision, I don't know the answer to your question, but I would guess that International Paper did.
Okay. And what kind of results, if you're aware of them? Are you aware of the results that come from this conductivity probe?
Prior to Mr. Vogel's passing, Paul and I would talk, I don't know, every 2 weeks about things. I mean, he was adamant around salinity, intrusion. I can say that the conductivity at that site has gone up from about 100 and 150 microsiemens up to about 450, 500 microsiemens. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but it's a 4x increase in less than a year. Okay, so what are the increasing components? If it were all chlorides, it would be a problem. Chlorides have gone up and silica has gone up. So it's effectively saying, I can't diagnose what that means, but I can say from a guy who ran water businesses for quite a few years, the increased speed, the rate of increase is what worries me more than what is increasing.
Mr. Garwood, how do you get that data?
Paul would tell me because he had the ability to look at it online. I emailed with Brooke last week and said that Paul had passed and I would like to, be her contact here on Daufuskie. And she said, well, I'm planning to come back in first of the year. So I said, okay, we'll coordinate. I imagine if I asked her, there is a website or there's probably a link or I can get a report from her. I know that she'll be very open to it, contra to some of the conversations that we've had today.
And to your knowledge, is Daufuskie Island Utility Company aware of this testing?
I've not talked to anybody there. I have no idea. As I wrote in my testimony, I'm unfamiliar with who or how you contact on anything like this. I've personally taken samples of water and had them tested twice since we moved here. I've lived the last 3 homes before we moved here were all on wells. I knew that every once in a while I should take a water sample over, and for $1.50 I can figure out whether I got a problem.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears on you. And we understand, it's been testified that there are 4 employees of Daniel Island Utility Company that work regularly. Daufuskie, sorry.
It's okay.
I am from Charleston, and DI to me converts as Daniel Island, and thank you, everybody. Daufuskie Island Utility Company. Do you know if those 4 employees, any of those 4 employees live on the island?
There's 4 employees that work at the utility here.
Do you know if any of those employees live on the island?
I do not. But if there are 4 employees here, I've not met 2 of them, and if they're elsewhere, that would explain why I would not know them.
Well, I gather that 2 of them may be. One of them is very new, from what we've been told. I think that ends my questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Caston, I see your light.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. Mr. Garwood,
Good afternoon.
in looking at your brief resume, were you at GE over that group when they developed or were marketing ZWE?
I was involved in buying it,
In buying?
Xenon.
Oh, okay. So the membranes.
That was the UF membranes. We already had RO membranes. We made filters. If you really want to go into it, I can, but let's just say
No, I don't.
It was a fabulous addition to the portfolio, and it allowed us to go after a lot more municipal work than, in fact, we were able to do previous to that.
I was familiar with them, so thank you.
Andrew is quite the character, I can say that.
You said it. I did not. Relative to the Consumer Confidence Reports, CCR, there's a requirement that these be, available annually. I can't remember the ways. Maybe it can be on the website, mail it to you. It can be at the office. And I don't know if is there an office? A DIU?
No.
Okay.
There is a fenced off area around the sewage treatment plant that during the day, the gate is open so that the 2 gents who work here can go in and out. To my knowledge, there's not an office there.
Well, these are, it may be on the website. I'm not sure. You should be able to have access to it. If not, you should be able to call them and get a copy. It does not have typically detailed information, it sounds like, that you're looking for, but it does give at least the basic parameters of water quality that.
Yeah. Do they test that, or do they have a third party off island do that?
I do not know.
I have asked to be with them when they're testing water and the wastewater, because the effluent wastewater, as you can guess, doesn't just evaporate. So it goes places. I think it goes to lagoons. I don't actually know. Well, I do know that it has to go to lagoons. And
the only
talk to Paul. Go ahead. Excuse me.
No, I apologize. I did not mean to talk over you.
Please.
Part of that, in the unregulated section, unregulated contaminants on the CCR, at least the copy I have that was presented to us, is sodium at 13 parts per million average, and I don't know what that is. So there is some information there that may or may not be of interest to you.
Well, if I could understand how to gain access, I would like that. And I do not, nor I think I answered this earlier. Our water quality right now is quite good. I don't want to be surprised and not have an alternative to 4,000 parts per million salinity water. which that's the salinity level on neighboring islands.
I really think that's the only questions I had. Now, relative to the 4 employees that Commissioner Williams mentioned, yeah, I don't know if there are 2 there or 4 there. I think in earlier questioning, we were simply told that there were 4 full-time employees that were
I think
there.
there's two that I'm aware of that are here. I don't think either one of them live here. I know one does not. I'm not sure where the second gentleman lives. If there are 2 that I don't know here, I would be surprised, because I know, I mean, you know, if they may be in an office somewhere for DIUC elsewhere, like in Florida or wherever.
Well,
I don't know.
Perhaps ORS or someone will know. I appreciate it. I hope your corned beef and cabbage turns out good. I hope you have cornbread to go with it.
Thank you. Well, let's just say that the first taste was not bad, and I did, in fact, ask my wife to come test it as well. So
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you, sir.
thank you, sir.
Commissioners, any further questions of this witness?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Irvin?
thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
As an engineer and water quality expert, what's your biggest concern about the system on your island?
The ability for it to treat intrusion, biologicals, or it's not likely that the aquifer is going to end up having volatiles, oil, gas, that kind of thing. But the treatment methods that are on island right now, I'm not 100% confident of. I think they are suspended solids, meaning get the stuff that is going to be in the water that's solid, get the suspended solids filtered out. I'm not familiar with any treatment beyond that.
What would be the appropriate treatment beyond that?
It's interesting. The last gentleman brought up ultrafiltration. You probably would have a pre-treatment, some form of filter, a UF, and then an RO, and if necessary, elemental additions back. That is a standard treatment for any brackish water, seawater, and based on the membranes that you end up putting in the reverse osmosis component, you can treat as salty a water as you want to as sweet you want to have it.
I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to ask you to tell me what UF and RO stand for.
Ultrafiltration, which is typically a very high-end filter, and it can take out up to it basically, if you run stuff through there, biologicals will be removed, some dissolved solids, but all suspended solids. RO is reverse osmosis. You can go to Lowe's and buy a reverse osmosis system to put into your house. An industrial or commercial RO system will end up having a pump to be able to get you to 900 PSI, 900 pounds per square inch, because that's what's required to have a membrane separate salt from the water. So what you're doing is you're concentrating the salt in a brine. So let's say that we're targeting to get 80% recovery of water from salty water. The 20% is going to have all 100% of the salt that was in the influent water. So that brine has to be dealt with. And here, either it would go back into the ocean or it would be treated in the sewage treatment plant.
What is the standard in the industry for treatment?
For which kind of treatment?
For treatment of, well, let's go water first, and then we'll go to sewer. Let's talk about water first.
So if you go to a surface water treatment facility, you're in Columbia. So let's say Columbia has got a lake that you're going to end up with a suspended solids reduction. It's going to be a filter, and you may have a UF or RO treatment if necessary based on what the components are in the lake water. If you're near the coast or in the Middle East or whatever, you're going to have an RO system put on the back end of that ends up being able to take 100% of the dissolved solids out of the water. The notion of the different technologies to treat water, they don't change very often. And in fact, every one of the used technologies was in the portfolio of the business that I ran. My wife and children didn't move up with me, so I worked a lot while I was up there, and I feel pretty comfortable that I could design a system here. In fact, I know how much the system's going to cost. They're going to end up having a 300 GPM container, maybe 2, placed here, and it would be capable of treating anything that the well or the notion of treating the seawater. You just would change the membrane that goes into the reverse osmosis components in the system.
How far away is this utility from meeting the standard in the industry at this time?
As I said, the water quality, I don't have any reports, but I don't have complaints about the water quality. It's about some of these unusual happenings that seem to be more frequent than I would guess. And so whether or not DIUC has a plan for long-term supply of water, I don't know. I just don't know. And whether or not they have a methodology to test quality on site so that you can monitor trends, I don't know that either. Those are the 2 things, as noted in my testimony, those are the 2 things that, were they to do a town hall meeting, I would guess they're going to get a fair number of people to attend. And there will be, a desire to have those discussions. The third component, which is specific to Daufuskie, there is a limitation on the amount of water that can be drawn from the aquifer, and it's permit-based. So if we exceed 75 million gallons, we'd have to go to extend the permit, or you'd have to start drawing water from something other than the aquifer. I had been told that the current volume of water coming out of, this is not from DIUC, the current volume of water coming out of the aquifer right now is in the 55 to 60 million range. If you have much of an expansion beyond the current people living here, we're going to be bumping up a limitation on water. That would be a problem.
What's the solution to that problem?
3 things I can think of quickly. Change the permit limit, go up. That would mean Savannah would probably be unhappy because theoretically they're the cause of the, they're the one that has the biggest draw on the water. The second is to find a secondary source of water. It's seawater desal. You're going to do desalination of some other form of water. Third is going to be some forms of conservation to reduce the draw on the well water right now. Irrigation is a big component. We are exploring right now in the Sustainability Committee having people put in shallow wells for irrigation purposes. That would address a lot of things. It would also negatively impact DIUC because they wouldn't be able to charge the quantity that they do for irrigation.
You're not a municipality, so there's no governmental entity on the island. Is that correct?
That's correct. Meaning the elected officials make up the Daufuskie Island Council. They don't have the ability and they don't have a budget. So we're just lovely participants in Beaufort County.
Have you looked into the option of trying to buy the utility?
As I mentioned to the woman a moment ago, I did when I was running GE, came down, and then for various reasons, we decided not to pursue operating assets along the coast. In hindsight, that was a bad decision to not pursue that. I have not conversed with them, but I have conversed with people here that should be an alternative that is considered. I think that some years back, and I'm going to get this wrong, Beaufort Jasper or something like that was in conversations, and the requested funds to acquire the utility were they were crazy. I mean, excuse me, they were quite high.
And,
I was not a party to any of those conversations, but I have heard and I understand that there was a document developed so that the description of the assets and the operating environment could be shared with them. I think it was 2-3 years ago.
let's talk just a moment about customer service. You indicated that you had difficulty getting anyone on the phone, responding to your request. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst and 1 being the best, where do they fall on the customer service scale?
I think it's important to point out, I've had 4 needs to contact them in 22 years. One, my basement filled with sewage. The response was, oh, it's not sewage, and if it is, it's probably not our responsibility. And then it was a variation of that for several weeks while my wife came down for her birthday the week after the sewage got in the basement. The second, third contacts have been around bills. And then the fourth range of contacts is around the saltwater intrusion and related quality discussions that we've had. So 4 requests that I've had over 22 years that were a little awkward, maybe. I would say that in general, I don't need to have much customer service. The water flows and the sewage goes back. And so it's the notion that things outside the norm don't seem to have a methodology to be dealt with. Put it a different way, if you shop at Walmart all the time and then one time you slip in the aisle, you're going to remember slipping in the aisle. You're not going to remember all of the great times that you had shopping at Walmart. So what I can't, from a personal experience, put a grade on it. I would guess it's pretty good unless it's an unusual request. And if it's an unusual request, I think that there's a repetitive notion that responsiveness isn't so great.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you answering my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Commissioners, anything further? Mr. Pringle, any redirect?
Chairman Belzer, I don't have any redirect, but Mr. Garwood, I want to thank you for your testimony, and I want to particularly thank you for mentioning my father in your comments. I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say it was a pleasure preparing and participating, but it was my first time, so it's any definition you want to give.
Mr. Garwood, we'd like to thank you for your testimony today and for your appearance and being patient, as I'm sure you had to wait a bit till we got to you, but thank you very much. And you may stand down. And you can hang up if you like, or you can continue to listen. It's your pleasure.
I'll go finish dinner.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
I'll have a good evening. Bye.
Mr. Pringle, anything else?
That's all from the POA interveners.
Okay. Last night, the time crept up on me. We were having so much fun, I didn't realize that it had gotten to be 7 o'clock. But we're not going to go till 7 o'clock tonight. So it's about 5:30. We have ORS witnesses left, is that correct? And y'all plan to put them up as 2 panels, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any housekeeping matters we need to take up before we adjourn or recess for the day? Oh, thank you, Ms. Ivy.
One thing, Madam Chair, you had asked for a corrected, I believe this was Exhibit 9.
Yes, it was a corrected rebuttal exhibit page for Mr. White, I believe, Schedule A4.
That's correct.
Okay.
We've got that for you. If we
Okay.
could please
Have you
approach.
given a copy to the court reporter
We have.
and to counsel?
That's correct.
And so those are for commissioners? Would you
Yes.
hand those up, please? That's fine. Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate that. Anything else before we adjourn or recess for the evening? 9:30 in the morning, does that work? 9:30 in the morning? Okay, thank you. Y'all have a good evening. Safe travels wherever you're going. We are in recess until 9:30 tomorrow morning.